What I'm going to do is start with a short story of an experience that I had when I was in college, which was many years ago. And we went to visit New York City very often. The school was on the other side of the river, and we would go down into Greenwich Village. And there was an individual down there, and he had a typewriter. Shows how old the story is. He had a typewriter, and the way he was actually paying for his college is people would come by and he would type stories for them about their experience in visiting New York. So a lot of New York is full of a lot of people that are visiting, and so they would come by and he would charge them, $5, $10, and he would quick type up a story about, the New York experience with them, and he used their names of their friends, names of their children, and stuff like that. The reason he was able to do this is because he had, 8 or 10 kind of stories in his head. And he would just merge them based upon, as he talked to these people, based upon some of the things that he thought that they were excited about, and write this quick story that would be something that they would then take home with them. The reason I bring that up is that, I think that I carry these 3 kind of techniques, analysis techniques, that for modeling problems, that I think apply across many domains, and I'd like to share those with you. The 3 different, and see if you also can, if you have them in your head and you hear discussion about some of these domains, it's really interesting how you're able to take those and apply them to the domain, or apply them to the problem, and it really helps you kind of go after the problem and better classify and categorize and work with the problem, and kind of cut out some of the noise that we have today that surround our problem analysis and our solution modeling. So that's what you're going to see here. It circles around 3 different main types for that. One being a complexity modeling, another being multi-dimension modeling, and the third one being a barrier or change modeling. And the third one is based upon the idea that what we're trying to do with problems is address. If it's a problem, we want to address it, so we want something to change. And what we see is in all these different domains of political, scientific, philosophical, business, that in those domains that the change barriers and the change processes are very similar. And there's a pattern there that I think that if we get those patterns in our head, it'll make things easier for us to kind of get those things in a way that we might be able to solve them. Anyway, hopefully these practices and modeling techniques will be helpful to other people other than just me. Thank you. So what we're going to do here is kind of use this PowerPoint to kind of do a quick walkthrough of the 3 different modeling techniques and give some visual examples, okay? And I think the visual examples will also help kind of frame the concepts. All right, but and the first one that we want to talk about is complexity modeling. All right, and that's where we talk about where we associate a specific solution type to a specific problem type, and I'll show you an example of that. Okay, and there are 4 problem types. There's common problems, complicated problems, complex problems, and chaotic problems. And there's a really big issue with regards to complexity modeling, in that it can really help us with regards to differentiation, and with when we're doing things like an employee experience or a customer experience, or the citizen's experience. It gets us into kind of what makes sense to do for to model those type of problems or situations that are involved in those types of problems. And then the idea of what is complex versus what is complicated and what is chaotic. So if we took a quick look at complexity, we see that with complexity modeling, as I talked about, there's 4 types: common, complicated, complex, and chaotic. That we find that the solution type are for all common problems is best practice. For common problems, there is a one right best practice solution. And whatever that best practice is, we can find through trial and error, but we find it, but then it can normally be applied to that problem no matter where it is. All right. The idea behind complicated problems is that there's one right best practice solution, but it's within context. All right. So So that if I can give a quick example, democracy has been accepted as, as probably, the common or the best practice solution for a polities of the 21st century. However, the best practice solution of democracy is different in Japan than it is in the United States and stuff like that. So that's a more complicated problem. The complicated part adds things. It still means that democracy is the one right best practice. It's just within context that democracy actually, executes differently. So it becomes execution issues, not ideological issues. Then if you go to complex, and there's a whole I have a whole presentation on complex problems, which you can look at it another time. But the idea behind complex is that you really have to go. We're going to find right patterns, all right, and there's going to be a methodology that we're going to use to go after solving the problems because it's situational. It's something where it changes. As Holland talks about complexity, it's very adaptive, and so that it has to adapt because the agents that it's dealing with are adaptive. It has to adapt itself. And then chaotic problems are whatever works, right? The important issue here is that you don't want to use complex solutions for complicated problems, and you don't want to use complex solutions for chaotic problems. And so, like in a political situation, since chaotic, if a problem really is chaotic, and then we're looking at what works, we really can't put some institutionalized process together. We really have to put a program together. We have to constantly monitor it. We have to see what's going on. So the idea behind chaotic is if it really is a chaotic problem, that we have to keep monitoring it, and we have to keep we have to define what works, but then we have to see if it's getting closer each time. So again, it's a constant monitoring and not a build a solution as we do with common problems and kind of just let it run. All right, in chaotic you can't do that. All right, so that's one of the basic issues regards to complexity modeling. But the point here is that once you put your problem in any one of these particular quadrants, the solution type kind of falls out as to what is the best solution type, assuming that you've defined your problem correctly. When you get to multi-dimensions, you're really looking at I'm looking at it as the end of duality, where this idea of opposites and so many problems that we face are dualistic problems. I think is part and parcel of an issue, at least in the United States, with regards to like our political situation. We keep addressing political problems as if there's only one or either a black or a white solution. So I think multi-dimensions brings us to an end to that duality, and we stop looking at problems so simply. Also, it's a more modern technique in multi-dimensions in that there's thought processes now within cognitive sciences that say that we're no longer just it's no longer a question of is it nature or nurture, but there's more components in the problem. There's more participants, so it's more multidimensional. And then the question in a multidimensional problem is there a need for autonomy? And I'll show you that. Easier to demonstrate with the modeling. All right. The idea again is that the black and white, the dualism, it was too simple. It's too simple a model for most of the problems that we have to deal with. All right. Most problems are multidimensional. The cube model, which is one of my favorites, but the cube model, it's more realistic, but with the idea that every slice has some component of each side of the model. So you can't have just brown and green in this model or green and blue. You really have to have every time you do a slice, you get a little bit of blue, a little bit of green, and a little bit of brown, no matter what you do. So that there's never a place in which you actually deal with the problem as if you can separate all three components. Whereas the Venn, which is another way of demonstrating dimension modeling, but the Venn says you basically can have that circumstance. You can have autonomous things that are happening just in the blue. All right, you can have things that are just happening in the green and in the red, but then you can have the blue and red, and you can have the green and red, and blue and green, and then you can have all three of them. So this one here in the middle with the little red dot is very similar to the cube. But it says that basically that the models actually has 7 different types of relationships, 3 of which are autonomous, four of which are relationships, and the one in the center, which is basically a three-dimensional or cube relationship. Again, this can be 4 or 5 dimensions, but the idea behind this dimension modeling is that once you pick the model and you start to define your problem and talk about your problem, you really find that it helps you talk about it, and it helps you kind of categorize it and fix the model. It also, again, if we can get away from the dualism, I think we'll find that our models don't fit that. Our problems don't fit that model. All right, and then the other one is barriers and change modeling. All right, and this one says that there's common patterns. There's a focus. You can focus on either speed or performance, and which we'll talk about in a couple minutes. And then the obstacles and programs are similar. So if we go to the visual model, what was found is, which I thought was really neat, is that that the determinant factor for what patterns you should use and what you need to do is basically the performance or the speed that you want to realize. So in essence, if I want to get an 8x performance, like I want really a radical performance improvement, then I'm going to have to generate a new process, and I'm going to have to break through vested interest. However, if I'm comfortable with 4x, I just need to do a process improvement and spend a little money. If I'm comfortable with a 2x improvement, which is a slight improvement, I can just do continuous improvement programs, and normally they can be implemented even within inside of without having to go out and spend money with inside your existing resources and your existing team, and they're just a way of taking the existing process and continuously improving it and tweaking it. But again, the point here is that you focus your argument, in essence, or your discussion on the performance or the speed. Again, if I need it tomorrow, and I may have to break through vested interest just because the speed itself makes it a radical performance improvement, even though it may only be a small improvement on what we're doing today. The time in which I have to do it forces it to become more radical. But this is, again, you keep these in your mind. I think that they have helped me in terms of discussions with people with regards to problems and solutions. You can, they certainly mix and match. I mean, you can take the dimensions area and match it with some of the complexity issues, and you can see how they kind of marry together. And then you see where they fit inside of the change barriers and what you have to do. So all of these, but having these three in your head, if you will, I think really gives you a kind of a good framework in which to go after problems and solutions. So anyway, that's kind of my introduction to a quick walkthrough to analysis modeling. Hopefully it's been helpful. If you have any questions, you can just email me, and thanks a lot. Bye now.